Oh, God. Is it? Yeah, there we go. Okay. I don't know. We got a lot of gremlins in this audio-visual department here. So, good morning, everybody. I'm sure you're awake now, at least temporarily. We are pleased to have another Sunday together. Look forward to our conversation. We are in the business of teasing out this deeper self that is behind the scenes. And these teachings that we bring out every Sunday are designed to shine light on this deeper dimension of our consciousness, to bring us into a state of union with our own soul. And so, in a way, it's referred to as a higher psychology, that the psyche, or suke in Greek, means soul. And so the idea that we have to retrieve our own soul is really the essence of deeper psychology. That psyche is lost. And what we have is the maps and guidebooks to bring this lost part of ourself, or bring attention to this part of ourself that is really the answer to all of our problems. So we're going to be looking today mostly in the Sufi tradition, the teachings of Hafiz, and Gurdjieff, G.I. Gurdjieff, was inspired by the Sufis, so you could say he's kind of in that camp. And then we're going to also bring out some interesting ideas from Carl Jung. And if we were to put all of that teaching under one umbrella, we would refer to it as Gnostic. Gnostic means to know, right, in Greek. And this idea of Gnosticism, we often associate it with Christianity because we dug up some ancient texts about 60 years ago, 70 years ago, that are referred to as Gnostic scriptures back in Egypt. And we have a class coming up on Gnosticism, so just a little thought there. But the idea of Gnosticism is this deeper intuitive knowing where your perception and what you're perceiving merge, that there is an identity of the seer, the process of seeing, and what's being seen, that there is a continuum, a tantra, a non-duality within the very act of experience, that when you have this higher knowledge or aware of this higher psychology, the barriers of separation and division fall away, and you realize that there's no inside or outside, that you're the one being experiencing itself in different manifestations or forms. And so that requires a higher vision, right? So last week we had a conversation about recognizing that the 5 physical senses are not giving you an accurate read on what's here and now in the physical world, that there is a bandwidth of perception that we are just not tuning into. And so as we get into these teachings of the higher psychology, what often needs to happen first is we cultivate a witnessing consciousness, right? Witnessing consciousness means that you begin to identify as the watcher or the subject that's viewing the objects. And so these objects range from the gross material sense objects of the physical world to bodily sensations, to emotional states, and to mental states or thoughts. And so the witness is the still point that is always the perceiver, the knower, the watcher, the still point. And as we cultivate this attention to the witness, this higher vision will naturally begin to emerge. This higher gnosis or knowledge will begin to emerge, this insight, because our very being is knowledge. Our very being is this intuitive knowing. And so it's really this recapturing or recognition, this knowing again, that we are the soul, the witness, the divine watcher. And so let's play with this a little bit this morning. So here's Hafiz. So this is entitled, Let's Eat. Why just show you God's menu? hell, we are all starving. Let's eat. Yeah. And, again, Hafiz, coming from the Sufi tradition, he's basically saying, let's not get hung up on the externals, right? Let's not read the menu. Let's get to a place where we can actually experience what we are talking about. And that's what we talk about on Sunday morning, that this is a way of going in and actually tasting these teachings, right? Directly perceiving and knowing them. So as we go on this journey together this morning, we're going to have, and Gurdjieff brings this out, we're going to have this part of our mind that's here in the church, looking, hearing, absorbing, conceptualizing, but simultaneous to that part of the mind that's here as the perceiver, there's always the witness, the one who's watching. So see if you can toggle back and forth between these two levels of awareness. That yes, you are here perceiving and sensing and understanding and listening. And at the same time, you're watching yourself do that. This is what Gurdjieff would call self-remembering. Self-remembering is you become an object in the awareness. You're not the subject, you're the object. And so we are oftentimes asleep, right? This is the idea that all Gnostic teachings point out. In the Gnostic teachings, we are asleep, and the world is the engine that is designed to keep us enthralled and hypnotized and mesmerized with these artifacts that keep us going into sleep, deeper and deeper levels of unconsciousness, distraction, avoidance, illusion. And so we are prone to go to sleep as the self that we name our first and last name, our body identity, our family line, our story, whatever that is. We go to sleep as that supposed personality. And so this practice of self-remembering is you're watching yourself as that subject. So right now as I'm speaking, I'm watching John speak. So John's speaking, but at the same time, there's this deeper awareness that I'm not really John. John is an object within my mind. Right? John is a conditioned personality. There's something more discrete, more direct that I'm in association with, and that is the still point within my awareness. And so these teachings are about awakening from that sleep, awakening from thinking you're the conditioned self or the surface personality, right? So when we talk about God, like we can come in every Sunday and have a conversation, very interesting, high metaphysics, really deep ideas, and we can do all of that within sleep. And we can sit here as the sleeping subject, thinking, wow, I'm really making a difference in myself right now, when all the while it's just variations of different illusions that I'm now entertaining as the conditioned self. I'm talking about God. The direct experience of high voltage spirituality is at a very safe distance. John will never get to that place of high voltage spirituality. John's always safe within the shadow, because John is a shadow. But when I begin to tune into the witness, that is light itself. That's awareness. And as a result of watching John, something changes in John. John can't go on being the pretender that he is when I start to really watch him. It's like they say in Search of the Miraculous, P.D. Ouspensky's book on Gurdjieff's teachings, that there are certain chemical processes that only take place in darkness. And if you were to shine light onto those chemical processes, it would interrupt the sequencing and the reactions that go on. Just like this, when you are the conditioned self and you begin to bring attention to that self that you thought you were, different channels, different ways of understanding and sensing begin to open up. Different pathways within the brain begin to fire. And you have an access that wasn't there when you were asleep as the subject. And so that's what Hafiz is saying. Let's eat. Let's partake of this hidden manna, this deeper Christ nature, this living water that is held back from ourselves by ourselves because we're so conditioned to be the unconscious self. Yeah? And here Hafiz calls this unconscious self the donkey. So he's in this poem, it's why just ask the donkey? Why just ask the donkey in me to speak to the donkey in you? When I have so many other beautiful animals and brilliant colored birds inside that are all longing to say something wonderful and exciting to your heart. Let's open all the locked doors upon our eyes that keep us from knowing the intelligence that begets love and a more lively and satisfying conversation with the friend. Let's turn loose our golden falcons so that they can meet in the sky where our spirits belong, necking like two hot kids. Let's hold hands and get drunk near the sun and sing sweet songs to God until he joins us with a few notes from his own sublime lute and drum. If you have a better idea of how to pass a lonely night after your glands have performed all their little magic, then speak up, sweethearts, speak up, for Hafiz and all the world will listen. Why just bring your donkey to me, asking for stale hay and a boring conference with the idiot? In regards to this precious matter, such a precious matter as love. When I have so many other divine animals and brilliant colored birds inside that are all longing to so sweetly greet you. So he's speaking here of how being asleep as the conditioned self, we're on a default setting or an autopilot. And we identify so firmly and completely as the body identity, the physical self, our name, our form, our story, our family, our history. And then we go about thinking that's what everybody else is. And we stay at this baseline of donkey consciousness, right? What he's calling a donkey is the beast of burden, the one who's carrying the past and holding itself back from really flying like a golden falcon in a state of ecstasy and divine union and love, knowing that we are truly joined and the friend can then join us, the friend being Allah or God. And so what we have here then is this invitation to unpack these hidden dimensions of ourself that are like treasures. He says, let's turn loose. Let's open up these locked doors. So one of the beautiful things about church is that we get around like-minded people. And it's, they say this in the Eastern teachings of Hinduism. It's sadhu sangha. It's an association with those who are seeking the path of perfection. And so when you are on this path, you want to associate with like-minded people who are trying to really stir up that fire of deeper knowledge and soul communion within themselves. And by doing this, we are able to infuse one another through osmosis in this alchemical process to encourage, inspire, and if we're really vulnerable and candid and honest with ourselves, when we get into really trustworthy relationships with our spiritual compatriots, they can point out our blind spots. They can begin to show us parts of ourselves that we were unconscious of that are actually holding us back. And so that's really what the deeper message of church is, in my opinion. It's a fellowship, it's a coming together, but it's also establishing these relational bonds that bring in this ability to see through others' eyes how you look, what you're really saying. I have the blessing of being with a partner who will never hold back in love and honesty when she's seeing a part of myself that is in, misalignment with my higher truth or operating out of that state of love. And it's confronting oftentimes. Sometimes it feels like I want to defend instead of say, yes, you're right. But upon deeper reflection, I'd say 60% of the time, she's got something worth listening to. All right, maybe 75%. All right. So maybe along these lines, we're at the next poem. Someone untied your camel. I cannot sit still with my countrymen in chains. I cannot act mute, hearing the world's loneliness, crying near the beloved's heart. My love for God is such that I could dance with him tonight without you, but I would rather have you there. Is your caravan lost? If you no longer weep, is your caravan lost? It is, if you no longer weep from gratitude or happiness, or weep from being cut deep with the awareness of the extraordinary beauty that emanates from the most simple act and common object. My dear, is your caravan lost? It is if you can no longer be kind to yourself and loving to those who must live with the sometimes difficult task of loving you. At least come to know that someone untied your camel last night, for I hear its gentle voice calling for God in the desert. At least come to know that Hafiz will always hold a lantern with galaxies blooming inside, and that I will always guide your soul to the divine warmth and exhilaration of our beloved's tent. So he's talking from this place of oasis, yes? That we're all on this pilgrimage or this desert journey towards the beloved or God. And the Sufis, they have this idea of forming the circle. And in an oasis, you can picture like this Sufi circle being where this living teaching is, where there's shelter, where there's support, where there's refuge. And so Hafiz is saying that we're traveling to this sacred circle, right? Because we are destined to awaken as the divine self. And the Sufis are an archetype of that. And so their oasis is our oasis. And he's saying one of our camels got lost. And that's the part of us that comes to church. That's the part of us that leaves that desert of isolation and is within earshot of the master teachers. And they hear our cry. And so they bring the lantern, they bring the lamp with 1,000 galaxies blooming inside. And they call us home, right? And he's saying you'll begin to come home. And as you come home, your sensitivity will go off the charts. You'll begin to see the miraculous within the most mundane and seemingly innocuous moments of your life. I mean, I'll bear a little bit here. I take Lisa's mom out shopping every week. And I can't put into words what her mom means to me. And I was describing to Lisa one night as we lay in bed about what just these simple moments of playing her mom's favorite music and driving in the car, and how you could just feel the enjoyment and the blessing without saying a word of the gift that, and I began to go through this natural process of thanking God for being able to buy the gas so that we can drive, that I had this car, that I had this ability to play the music on the radio, like just this immense wave of blessing for every little minute thing to share in this precious moment with her mom. And it was so overwhelming that as I was telling her that, I couldn't speak. I couldn't hold back the tears. And this is what Hafiz is saying, is what I thought of when I read it. He says, is your caravan lost? It is, if you can no longer weep from gratitude or happiness. Your caravan is lost if you can't weep from being cut deep with the awareness of the extraordinary beauty that emanates from the most simple act and common object. Right? Because we're asleep. God is whispering to us every moment. And if we're just being the donkey, we're not going to hear it. We're not sensitive enough as the donkey, and we're too concerned with the burdens on our back to ever hear that still small voice that calls to us incessantly. This is very nice. Last one. Forgive the dream. All your images of winter I see against your sky. I understand the wounds that have not healed in you. They exist because God and love have yet to become real enough to allow you to forgive the dream. You still listen to an old alley song that brings your body pain. Now chain your ears to his pacing drum and flute. Fix your eyes upon the magnificent arch of his brow that supports and allows this universe to expand. Your hands, feet, and heart are wise and want to know the warmth of a perfect one's circle. A true saint is an earth in eternal spring. Inside the veins of a petal on a blooming redbud tree are hidden worlds where Hafiz sometimes resides. I will spread a Persian carpet there, woven with light. We can drink wine from a gourd I hollowed and dried on the roof of my house. I will bring bread I have kneaded that contains my own divine genes, and cheese from a calf I raised. My love for your master is such, you can just lean back and I will feed you this truth. Your wounds of love can only heal when you can forgive this dream. The tenderness of the divine teachers that are always ready to greet us. You know, oftentimes they'll be ministering to us in the unseen. Sometimes we have the blessing of a teacher that can be such a vessel, very rare. But these hidden teachers are always here, and that's why we have to come out of the stupor of the donkey consciousness, because our sensitivity will increase to the point where the spiritual eye will open, and we will see these hidden planes of consciousness. We will be feeling those touches that these masters touch us with from these higher dimensions of ourself. And so what Hafiz is mentioning here is how we have to become very vulnerable and soft and open and yielding to such a teaching. You know, as the donkey carrying the burdens with all of these wounds from the dream, we oftentimes have built very strong defenses and have a very thick shield to protect us from people getting too close. And that has served for a little while in certain situations. It has come to use. But when it comes to helping you come out of that nightmare, it is a major obstacle, because now the teachings will be shielded against. You won't let them in. And the master's touch won't be felt, let alone will you lay back and let him feed you. So part of this teaching is to become a little child, right? To totally abandon these defenses that we have built around our woundedness. Is your caravan lost? And as a result of feeling lost, we know we have to come home. But the torture or torment is we want to come home and still we're trying to defend ourselves and keep ourselves safe by blocking everyone else out, including the teachings. And so this childlike vulnerability, this softening, right? You don't do it around everyone, because there are still those slick ricks that are trying to take advantage, and those that are only after certain things that would benefit their selfish dream. And you have that discerning eye to know not to cast pearls before swine. That is still true. But when you're around like-minded people, and when you're alone in your prayer room, let down the shields. Let it in. Soften. Know that the teacher's here, ready to feed us. And I love what he says too, about this woundedness, that we're still listening to an old alley song. Right? This, the alleys of where the nefarious and underhanded things take place, these labyrinths of shadow within the unconscious, these old alleys, and these songs that still play on the awareness radio that we think is still us. This is the conditioned mind, that we hear these voices from our past, from our sordid past maybe, these alleys that we've traveled through. And they also will put up a strong resistance to coming into the light. And that's why in the self-remembering practice, you're not judging anything. You're not putting any kind of a moral check or a minus on something that you're looking at about yourself. You're simply watching it. And as you're watching these parts, as sordid and shameful as they may be, these old alley songs, you're just allowing the light of your awareness to rest on them. And like we've been saying, there'll be a chemical reaction to that. The old patterning that was operating within the dark alley of the unconscious, when witnessed with the light of your awareness, will undergo an alchemical change. The old chemical bonds will break just by watching. And then finally here, when we are breaking up erroneous perception, what begins to come in very clear on the awareness radio is this deeper rhythm. Right? In Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, he uses a Sanskrit word, ritambara prajna. And it's ritam in Sanskrit is where we get the English rhythm. Ritambara prajna is the rhythm of prajna, or wisdom. In other words, we begin to rest or are carried in this wave of prajna, of Sophia, of wisdom. We begin to have this recalibration through vibration that begins to show up on every level of our being. We become tuned. Right? It's naturally here when the erroneous perception begins to break up and we're letting down the shields. Let's take a moment and just rest in that teaching. Breathe it in. Invite it in. And as we are taught in these sacred teachings, breath and spirit are usually the same word in the sacred languages. And so God's breath and our breath can merge as we bring our conscious attention and intention to join with divine presence into a holding pattern of this present moment, that our own breath can merge with this deeper rhythm, this breath of the all-merciful that is blowing through all things. And so as we breathe in God's wisdom. And as we breathe out all of our burdens and our stress, releasing the donkey consciousness. Breathing in grace, letting it flow and filter through all the nooks and crannies and alleys and highways and byways of our consciousness. And breathing out any shields or blocks that we put up as a defense to keep our wounds safe from others. We want to open the doors and windows this morning and let this gentle light and the gentle masters that embody this light to come in through the breath. And just like Hafiz says, that what made the rose blossom was the touch of light upon it. And so we want to feel that touch of light this morning within the rose of our heart. Let it blossom, let it bloom, let it unfold. Just relax. Forgive the dream. So keeping on this idea of cultivating intimacy with God, having this immediacy of the divine nearness, as close to you as your breath, right? As close to you as the witnessing state of your own mind or awareness. So this is what, again, to use that umbrella term, is Gnosticism. It is this direct, intuitive, immediate knowing that is not the knowing of the lower conditioned ego self, right? Because that's just a menu about God. It's not the living, pulsing essence of God. So that conditioned self can only know about things. It could never understand or directly experience the Dan an sich, the thing in itself. And so this thing in itself is joined or merged with our own awareness. And these teachings have us suss out through our attention that this is the case already. We've never left our source. Separation is always an illusion. We are an eternal living entity that is having amnesia because we have fixated our attention on this donkey, this burdened, lower conditional self. And so the Gnostic teachings awaken us from that sleep or that conditioning. And Carl Jung, you could say, would be one of the more present day or contemporary Gnostics, self-admittedly so. And this is a very interesting book, Cattle Falque, by Peter Kingsley. He's a Jungian scholar, does an excellent job in this book of bringing out the deeper essence of Jung's teaching that often gets lost. And this is Jung being quoted here by Peter Kingsley. So long as religion is only belief and outward form, and the religious function is not experienced in our own souls, nothing profound or radical has happened. It still remains to be understood that the mysterium magnum, life's great mystery, is first and foremost rooted in the human psyche. Whoever doesn't know this from inner experience may be a most learned theologian, but doesn't have a clue about religion. Right? So that's Jung's quote. And that echoes something that is said in A Course in Miracles, that a universal theology is impossible, but a universal experience is necessary. Universal theologies are impossible. You can't get everyone to believe what you believe. You can't evangelize people into your belief system and think that you've won the day, because that's still at the level of talking about. It's still within the duality of the lower mind, and that will never bring you into the experience. So when you have a universal experience, when you have gnosis, then you could see, no matter what belief system somebody may be ascribing to, beyond the appearance of that belief system, either the light's on in that house or the light is off in that house. And if you've been lit up through gnosis or direct experience, you could see in the Sufi and the Buddhist and the Jew and the Christian, the light is on, even though they're calling it Allah or Dharmakaya or Samantabhadra or whatever you're going to call it. The light is on. The essence is there. And the archetypes can be sussed out and dealt with, if you want to have a deeper conversation at that philosophical level. But the hearts will join because both recognize the light. It's the namaste. The light in me recognizes and bows to the light in you, right? And even if the light isn't on at that level of the human being, we are taught in these teachings that it is there. It's just covered up, right? Oftentimes we're blocking it, as we've been saying, because we're wounded, we're afraid. Our caravan is lost. And so as the teachers that bring this teaching of light and remembrance, we are to, as it says in A Course in Miracles, deny the denial of God in that mind and look for that light in them. It's the lost sheep. And that is you. And as you find the light in the least of these, my brethren, you strengthen it within yourself. In fact, it's your dharma. It's your duty to do that, because that self is yourself. And if you exclude one sheep from the fold, your caravan is lost, and you're wandering in the desert. Everyone is welcome back. Everyone is included in this light, whether they can recognize it or not, whether they're acting insanely or not. Your role now as a forgiver of the dream is to recognize that every dream figure is a lost part of yourself. And the fact that they're coming to you, you listen for that camel in them that's calling for the voice for God. And that's all you look at. That's all you answer. Right? This is what we're called to. Everything else, he says, doesn't matter. So it's really good to join with those that have the light on. But we strengthen one another so that when we go back out into the seemingly dark dream, that we shine the light and cultivate the light in others by denying that they could ever be separate from their source. It's impossible. If I affirm that, then I'm having to own that. I can't escape that. There is no inside and outside. There is only this. And whatever I give to this, I give to myself. I am a whole light being, as you are. And so I'm encountering myself, as you are. This is your voice. But you also have this ability to pay attention to whatever radio station you fancy. So we could pay attention to Donkey Radio and stay there, locked in place, totally asleep. But there's something in us, this camel that brought us here this morning, that isn't comfortable with that anymore. And so it's time to cultivate this deeper intimacy so that this light can get brighter and more powerful in us. Listen to this. Peter Kingsley now. Then Jung simply moves from provocative, what he just said to us, to even more provocative. Quote, if it was not a fact of experience that supreme values reside in the soul, psychology would not interest me in the least. I have been accused of deifying the soul, but it is not I. It's God himself who deified it. It's not I who assigned a religious function to the soul or psyche, the human psyche. I merely presented the facts. End quote. In Kingsley here. And so Jung arrives at the heart of psychology, as well as the core of people's resistance to it. Right? This intimacy. Jesus says in A Course in Miracles, how does he say it? He says, basically, I'm paraphrasing here, like being separate and at a standoff with your brothers isn't something that really bothers you. What really bothers you is joining with them. That really bothers us. Letting the guard down, letting the defenses down, letting people come close. Right? You get to, remember, do this dual attention that Gurdjieff prescribes. There's a part of us that's here listening right now. There's a part of us that can witness and self-remember by looking at the character that we play in the movie. And so as this teaching gets even more close, watch the character's resistance to it if it comes up. But don't judge it, note it. Here's Jung speaking about this resistance to the fact that at the heart of our psyche is deity. If the theologian really believes in the almighty power of God on the one hand, and in the validity of dogma on the other, why then does he not trust God to speak in the soul? Why this fear of psychology? In other words, here we have, end quote, Kingsley now. In other words, here we have Jung's own statement of what psychology is, as well as why it matters so much. It's the art or science of learning to listen to the voice of God speaking in the human soul. Far from the soul existing in Jung's mind as some psychological or alternative to religion or God, it's the only possible pathway to both. This is why for him soul is wisdom, Sophia in Greek. Inside Jung's Red Book, let's not get into that. Oh, actually, no, this is good. So the soul is wisdom, right? That this is the divine wisdom deep within our own heart. And he's saying in his Red Book, which was his journey into his own unconscious, he painted this painting of the spirit of wisdom just as he wanted her to be seen. And in this painting that Jung did in the Red Book, the wisdom personified, she's standing tall, veiled but magnificent, in a crowded church. And later he would comment on this painting. And this is the point, and we'll finish here. In all her ambiguity and ambivalence, she, the soul, Sophia, appears with her veiled face as an extraordinary, utterly mysterious feminine being in a church, taking the place of the altar. This is how the reality of the soul will eventually be restored to the Christian church, not as an icon, but as the altar itself. So now this gets to the very heart of what our talk is today. Not only are we talking about intimacy and letting down the barriers, but that within the very root or heart of our being is the most worthy place where God wishes to dwell, that we are the altar. So there's a section in A Course in Miracles in chapter 2, it's called Restoration of the Altar. And he's saying that for most of us, we are under this defense mechanism called externalization. That what we do is we immediately push away this information of intimacy, opening, and vulnerability, and we externalize it. We think that it's found out there in the holy person or in the church or in the, sacraments. So that's a defense mechanism. He's saying in that teaching, as Jung was saying here, that it's the immediacy of our own heart. That this worthiness is something that we have to accept about ourselves. That's why we have to forgive the dream. Because it's a dream of unworthiness in various forms and guises. This has been a dream of unworthiness. Maybe we're making others unworthy so that we can look better. But it's still a dream of unworthiness. And if we leave anyone out of this blessing, we bar our own way to this altar within. Okay? Good? Are we awake or are we sleeping? So this is the bit of Sufi teachings that come from Yanis Tsoulis. This is written in the foreword of Sufism, The Way of Blame, for those interested. And it gets to this point that we've been speaking of here. I'll summarize it a bit. Speaking about this Sufi tradition, that in the tradition, the Adamic species created by God has this incredible capacity to synthesize all realities, from the most natural to the most celestial, that we are able to bridge, unify, and integrate these realities into our divine psyche, right? So that we are all things in all, filling heaven and earth, much like we get in the Christology of the New Testament. Let this mind be in you, that was also in Christ Jesus, who is above the heavens and below the hells, fills all things, right? This is our inheritance. And so in the Sufi teaching, the mind, the witnessing state, is compared to a mirror. And it's saying here, so great is the perceptive and sapient scope or wisdom consciousness of the human essence that it has frequently been compared to a polished mirror. And you get this in Buddha's teaching too, yes? You polish the mirror, make it bright. Don't let any dust alight. So the polished mirror, this is because of the mirror's capacity to reflect any particular thing without becoming that thing. This is why we cultivate that second attention of witnessing. You're witnessing what's arising within the conditioned reality of the lower self, but like a mirror, you're not attached to it. It's just stuff that's reflecting on the mirror-like awareness of your mind. No need to get upset or get attached. No highs or lows. You're watching. And so he says here, the Sufis regard the ego self as an artifact of this world or dream, born of instinct and faulty sensory perceptions that obscure and constrict the essential range of human understanding and expression. So when Hafiz talks about these ideas in his poems where he flows out into the entire universe, and that he, as we had read, he even is within the sap of the veins of the leaves, that your consciousness literally becomes all things and you're attuned to all things as yourself in the most microcosmic and macrocosmic. When we are the ego, we constrict, we draw in, we shield ourselves within our own private little world. It's a prison cell. And so we lose that identity of Adam as the great synthesizer of the angelic and the human, the terrestrial and the celestial. So he says, the self-centered person tries to preserve his mortal identity by painting it on the mirror's surface, right over his reflected image. He continues to reify or make it real, this constructed identity, with the images he paints over the mirror of his true nature, and thereby restricting its range. So in other words, he's saying that our conditioned self is like we've painted on the mirror. And this is me, this is my story, this is who I am. I have become the dream. So the awakening of the dream, first and foremost, is to begin to watch your painting of the false self or ego and know it's not you. Yeah? How much gas do we have left in the tank? I think last thought here. I know we're maybe weary of having these ideas coming in, but let's just put a cherry on top. This is taken from Ouspensky's classic, In Search of the Miraculous, and we'll finish with this. Gurdjieff here. Now, Gurdjieff has gone through this teaching that we've been talking about, this idea of false identity, right? And he's using Ouspensky as this false identity. So you would put your name there. So whenever you hear Ouspensky, you hear your name. So the first stage of work on oneself consists in separating oneself from Ouspensky or John mentally, in being separated from him in actual fact, in keeping apart from him. But the fact must be borne in mind that the whole attention must be concentrated upon Ouspensky, Trisha, Rich. For a person is unable to explain what he himself really is as the mirror or witnessing consciousness. You can't put that into words. It's beyond words. But he can explain who Ouspensky is, who John is, who Eva is, to himself or herself. And with this, he must begin, remembering at the same time that he is not Ouspensky. So that's your homework, if you are willing to take it on. This mission impossible. In 5 minutes, this tape will self-destruct, but before that, the blue bag will go around. Any thoughts, comments? So many. You struggle with? Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, so the forgiveness, we can't really do this justice in 30-second sound bites, but the forgiveness is really you forgiving, self-constricting and limiting yourself into the me things. That's where the forgiveness is. It's the dream that you're having of being this alternate self. It has nothing to do with what that alternate or false ego is doing in the dream. That's actually part of an illusion. You can't forgive illusions. You can only forgive the mind that has believed in illusion. Then all illusions go away because the cause, which was the false ego that you thought you were, has been dropped, seen through. And that's a process, like we've been saying. It takes a while. And there's going to be resistance and conflict and pushback and, mental dissonance, and all of that stuff's going to be part of the symptom package of this deeper forgiveness. But the forgiveness is never done with objects in the world or people in the world or situations in the world. It's done with the one who thinks she's the self living in the world. That's the root. That's the only problem that you're having. I'm having. Any of us are having. We believe, I wanted to say something very crass, but I won't. We believe in our bones that we are this self. And that's why this awakening teaching is so necessary right now. We're lost in a desert, and we need to find our way home. And you'll get to the point where you'll do anything to get home. Maybe that hasn't happened yet, but for all of us, that day will come where everything in the dream pales. And all we want to do is forgive it and feel the beloved again, warming our heart. Right?
Well done.
Thank you. And we bless this offering and charge it with the intention that it awakens others from the dream in whatever form it may take. Let it be that camel's voice that calls to God. So it is. All right, my friends, let's seal the deal. Resting within the Sacred Heart, this psyche of Sophia or wisdom that we've been given for all eternity, which is the altar that God wants to kiss in this moment. Let us drop all of our veils and all of our shields and let this kiss land deeply on our heart so that we can know that the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen. Have a beautiful day, everybody. Course in Miracles tomorrow night. We hope you can come.